So please accept that. And there we go. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. So without further ado, Susie, um, it's all yours.
Thank you, Michelle. All right. So, yes, today I want to share Jacob's journey from birth to age 29. I created this PowerPoint for other families that were newly diagnosed with Cohen's. So, each of the slides have a lot of information, and that's so when I send it out, they can read the information themselves. If they have any questions, of course, they can always contact me. And let's begin. This is my family, and I
Susie, I'm
do
going to
have.
share that your presentation just is showing us a quarter of your page now. For some reason, it was zoomed in. So if you have the ability to zoom out, I'm wondering if you touch something.
I moved like the picture of me. Is it fixed now?
No, does Judy, would you mind telling me if you see the full screen or if you're seeing a zoomed in screen?
I see the full screen.
You see the full screen. It might just be me then. Okay, thank you so much. Go
Okay,
ahead,
that's
Sue.
all right. Very happy to hear that that's only on one side. All right. So, yes, this is my family. I've been married for 30 years now. Jacob's our oldest at 29, and I have a daughter, 25, and a son, 23 years of age. My agenda today is to tell you my intention of this presentation, talk about Cohen's syndrome in an overview, talk about the beginning of having a child with Cohen's syndrome, the interventions, which there are a lot of, and so I hope you enjoy. And I hope that you learn something and maybe want to try something new that you hadn't heard of before. And then, of course, we'll have questions and answers at the end. I do have a disclaimer that I am not a therapist, a doctor, a nutritionist, or a teacher. I am just a parent of a child with Cohen syndrome. I'm also a certified Wilson reading practitioner, and I will talk about Wilson a little bit later on in the presentation. I have had the pleasure of meeting other families with Cohen syndrome. Since Jacob was diagnosed around age 5, we were meeting in Ohio, which in Middleburg, which was only like 20 minutes from my house. So I was really blessed to be able to attend them yearly. Then they were every other year, every 5 years, and then they weren't for a while. We have started getting back together again. And there's another one coming up under the Cohen Syndromes Association. It'll be next year, Wednesday, August 12th in 2026. It's in Windsor. I don't know all the details, but if you go to either the Cohen Syndrome Association or Cohen Syndrome Research International Consortium, you can sign up and let them know you're going. I plan on being there since I'm fortunate enough for that to be in my backyard. So, what is Cohen syndrome? If you don't know, it's an inherited disease. Each parent has the recessive gene, which then gives the symptoms to your child. Um, they will have intellectual disability, a small head size, which is called microcephaly, a weak muscle tone, which is called hypertonia, and they also have retinal dystrophy, which affects each child differently. Jacob also has peripheral loss. Um, they have, I'm trying to read this here. The low tone, which means they're very, very flexible. Feature wise, you can meet a child, especially when they're infants, and anybody who has a Cohen child will recognize it immediately. A lot of times, families will come onto the Cohen's page and say, "Do you think my child has Cohen syndrome?" And we'll say, "Send a baby picture." A lot of times, that baby picture will let us know more so than when they're adults. Along with that, they have beautiful, lush hair, thick eyebrows, lovely eyelashes. A lot of times their ventrum here will be shorter, which kind of gives them a little bit of a wider smile look to them. They are generally shorter in stature, and they have neutropenia, very friendly behavior. I've only met one child that had some behavioral issues, but that's not very common. Obesity, trunk obesity is quite normal as well. They will have long fingers and feet, And I think that kind of covers what Cohen syndrome is. Neutropenia, Jacob has, as I tell him, he doesn't have enough soldiers in his blood to fight off infection. So if he just gets a scratch, as you can see in this picture here, it'll immediately turn to an infection. He's ended up with 2 cellulitis. So we're always having to do a body check real quick to make sure that if he were cycling low, that he wasn't developing an infection. Some kids have it very severe. And if you go to the Cohen's page, you can meet other families who are part of the neutropenia society, and they will tell you a lot more than what I ever could tell you. Jacob does have the retinal dystrophy, and he has been diagnosed with central vision, but no peripheral vision. And I have now been giving this speech monthly to caregivers that work out of Ohio. And as I teach about Cohen syndrome, I do this little demonstration, and I'm going to do it real quick for you. I highly advise that if you're talking to teachers, caregivers, a case manager, that you do this presentation for them, because every time I do this every month, some people that know Jacob will say, well, I noticed that he has a cane, but he has glasses, he can read, he goes to the movies, he sees me, he sees the world, he goes to plays. Why does he have the cane? So what I first do in the presentation is I hand out some lovely toilet paper rolls, and I say, put these up to your eyes and then make one circle and look around, because this is Jake's vision. I think this is where he's at. It's not horrible, but he can see very well. Then I pass along some paper towels. Do the same thing. Put it to your eye, make one circle. And I say, this is progressive vision loss. And yeah, I don't think Jake's here yet. I don't know. I don't expect him to get here, but they all pass it along. And some people are like, oh, that's interesting. Then at the very end, I say, now I give them wrapping paper rolls. Do the same thing. Put it to your eye, make one circle. And every time I hand this out, they all take in a gasp of air and they'll say, oh. And a lot of times it's so upsetting, they put it down, they give it away. They don't want to see how our kids are seeing. And the thing that's very nice about doing that is that they understand why they have a cane. They understand that when you point to something and say, pick that up, just like I go out of view in the camera, you go out of view to that kid with only central vision. And it's been a very eye awakening. And I highly, highly, highly recommend anybody, like I said, family members, teachers, caregivers, babysitters, let everybody understand that point of view. I'm going to talk quickly about Jacob's physical development. And I find this to be important, that even though our guys are smaller in stature, as you can see, birth to 3 years, still following the growth spurts and the curvature and the growth. So very normal, but just tinier. And here we have Jacob 6 to 20 years. You can see he plateaued when he should have. And we're kind of one of the luckier ones. He's about 5'8". And the weight, so as you can see, he was like in the negative 20 percentile. But between the height and the weight, Jacob appeared very healthy, because he kind of was. He just wasn't. It's almost like we need our own Cohen graph to use as opposed to a typically developing child. And of course, the head circumference, again, following the normal curvature, but on the smaller end, which we know was going to happen. So in the beginning, Jacob was born on February 29th, 1996, weighing in at 3 pounds, 10 ounces. He was 5 weeks early, 17 inches long, and I had just assumed he was preemie, not knowing much about preemies, but had seen like characteristics of Jacob with the small head, the failure to thrive. He didn't nurse. These kids have a hard time swallowing. and with the swallow pattern, with the way the tongue will move and draw, you could draw the liquid in, but just not the wave motion for the tongue to bring the liquid back to the back of the throat. So instinctively, I learned to kind of use gravity to let him nurse. But he left the hospital weighing a whopping 4 pounds. But he did have the small head, the failure to thrive, the long fingers, the low tone, poor eye contact, an incredibly quiet baby, and an odd whistling noise. And I've heard other families say that they heard that whistling as well. Not certain what this was, but just when he would take in a breath, it would have this type of a sound. I was trying to find some videos last night to see if I could share one with you. I haven't found one with the baby and that whistling noise, but I plan to find it at some point. 3 months to 1 year. At 3 months, he was not able to pick up his head. So tummy time is really important to make time for it, to try and get them to lift that head up. And by 4 to 6 months, he did. I'm going all off of memory, so I'm pretty certain based on pictures that these are pretty accurate. 8 months, he tried to sit up, and you can see in the lower corner that he was trying to sit up, but he was always bracing himself. He really didn't have the muscle tone to even sit up well, even when he started to at 10 months. At 1 year, he was not able to walk and or bear weight on his feet. And he wasn't babbling, he wasn't feeding himself. He was a really quiet, very floppy baby. Sometimes pediatricians will refer to them as floppy and not explain that term of low tone. 17 months to 3 years. 17 months, he was army crawling. And a lot of people were trying to push me to get him to walk. The physical therapist said, no, slow down and make sure that they get up to that reciprocal crawling. You want that left brain to work, not that army crawling. It's not the same. You don't want to miss that step. So even if they are walking before they crawl, get back to crawling, or make, just like you made tummy time, make crawling time. It's really, really important for that brain to get that input. At 3 years of age, we discovered he needed glasses, and he was a -8 and a -8.5. So very severe. I'm a -4, and I cannot believe how bad that is. Not to mention that this baby really wasn't seeing his world. At 2.5, he could walk, but only with the DAPAs, and I'll talk about those a little bit more. And last night I was looking at videos of him at 3 years of age. He still really wasn't talking. In the video, we were just trying to get him to say hi. And when he did say hi, there was no tone in the face, the lip motion. It was more kind of a sing-songy, huh, instead of hi. We tried to get him to say, what does a cow say? And he couldn't put his lips together to go moo. It was just moo, very, very low tone in the face. Between 4 and 6 years, he could identify all the states, which was a little confusing to me, and the ABCs, because I'm thinking this kid is a quiet savant. But I quickly realized that just because he identified the states didn't mean he understood what any of that meant. At 5 years, he was memorizing sight words, and he was reading Greetings and Ham, which the reason people push that book is because there are 100 sight words in that book. And sight words you don't read, they're called sight words because you see them, you say them. And it was a little confusing for school time because they said, well, he's reading green eggs and ham. No, he was reading sight words, which meant to me also he had strong memorization skills. And so I used that when I started to homeschool him. By 5 years of age, he was potty trained, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little later. And his handwriting started to emerge, but with the low tone, it wasn't really great handwriting. He attempted, but even the motor planning of all the letters, it was a big struggle. So this was the beginning of his handwriting, and this is his handwriting today. Not exactly functional. Luckily, with modern technology, it doesn't really have to be. He does do a nice job texting, so he can text himself if he wanted to do. We were trying to journal. So here it says Tuesday, I went shopping for food, took my bath, brushed my teeth. put away the dishes, vacuumed, and lastly, he called Seth, who's his best friend. We'll talk about him a little later too. This was handwriting on Adderall, and it's a bad picture. I don't even know where this is anymore. I had found it and had taken a picture of it. If you can see it, it was amazing how well he wrote on Adderall. The problem was when he was on Adderall, he wasn't a person. I don't remember what the dosage was. All I remember my husband telling me what's wrong with Jake because he just became a zombie. So as beautiful as his handwriting was, he wasn't functional. So I made the choice not to use the Adderall. Potty training happened only because I came across the product White Cloud, which is probably the cheapest diaper on the market. And when urine fills it up, it becomes lumpy and gross and wet, and he hated it and he wanted them off. The very nice, expensive diapers where you don't know you've used it isn't helpful. So this is just something you can do. It worked for Jake very well. Interventions. We're going to go through all these interventions I came across. Sometimes it was from somebody in a grocery store to a therapist. Luckily, a lot of these had just great positive influences on his development. The first thing I learned about was that in Ohio, they promote intervention and early intervention. And he got his early intervention through Happy Day School. So he started there at 11 months until he was 4 years of age. I think every state should have a DODD, a Department of Developmental Disabilities. You can get in there and you can start getting interventions and finding therapists and getting early intervention. While I was there at Happy Days, an occupational therapist had told me to read The Child with Special Needs. And when I had gotten there at 11 months, I was still under the impression that Jacob was a preemie and he was going to catch up. When he turned 18 months, I finally picked up the book, The Child with Special Needs by Stanley Greenspan. The book became my Bible. And on page 9, he talked about how he had taken a completely nonverbal child. And the first thing he taught that child was how to answer yes or no appropriately. And I can't emphasize that intervention being a focus, an IEP goal, because when a child is able to answer yes or no, that empowers them. My biggest example will be if you don't like coffee, don't serve me coffee if I want tea. And if they're not able to say they don't like something, because Jacob will always answer, or he always would answer the last choice. Do you want tea or coffee? Coffee. Well, he doesn't want coffee. And he will still do this today. So my intervention to that is I will say, do you want coffee, tea, or mud water? And since I know he doesn't want muddy water, he'll have to think about what he wants to get. So being able to answer yes or no to questions is an empowering move. And Stanley Greenspan wrote about it in his book and really empowered me to empower Jacob. So the first part of the book, and there's a quote here, the first part of the book talks about the factors that contribute to a child's problems. And then the second part of the book talks about how to ameliorate those problems. And my book is all marked up with all the interventions that he did. The other thing that's in there are the 6 milestones. Another one that you can't skip. You master milestone 1 before you go on to milestone 2. And even if there's splintered skills, you still want to focus on the skills that go because they are building blocks. Then he talks about floor time. Floor time is like playtime, but you learn how to draw out emotions for them so that they can have higher order thinking skills, which are called HOTS. But highly recommend this book. Another intervention that we use, like I had said, looking at Jacob at 3 just the other day and seeing that he couldn't go moo. It was just a moo. I ended up with an occupational therapist who said he needs to start chewing gum because that low tone that they have throughout their body is also in their mouth, it's in their jaws, it's in their tongue. So she said, and it has to be bazooka because it's hard, it's difficult. And I said, okay. Have a bib when you give them that because the sugar just makes them drool. It's very messy. And initially, he couldn't bite that gum and he couldn't move it over to the other side either. So I would have to help him along. A good sensory, getting that gum in that mouth, plus the muscle tone. And then we would also use the nookie brush. Jacob was an incredibly picky eater. When he ate a can of SpaghettiOs, he would only eat that smallest noodle. I would have to go through that can and only get the little itty bitty noodles because anything bigger than the tiniest noodle in that can, he would spit out. So this desensitized his mouth. You just run it around there and desensitize, and that helped with eating as well. So the gum and the nookie brush for both of those. Daphos. With the low tone, Jacob could not walk. He had flat feet, and this helped build him up, put all the joints in place, and he was able, as soon as he got those on, he was able to walk. And then he had to work on strengthening. I hated Daphos and loved them on the same end. They're very difficult. You have to get casted. Then once you're casted, they have to wear them for only a couple hours a day, see where the marks, where they're rubbing. Then you have to go back to the therapist, have them blown out so that they fit comfortably. And then 8 months later, they need a new pair because they've grown. But highly recommend them for stability in walking. This is another intervention that I think really helped Jacob with transitioning. Since these kids are not moving around, the brain is not getting any input. When you have a typically developing child, they're sitting, squatting, rolling, just getting all this information into the brain, and they're getting that body awareness of where their hands are to their body. My hands only goes this far. So brushing is that you would take this brush, put it on skin to skin, and with just a little bit of pressure, not too much, you would go down and just a couple strokes. And you would do it on the arms, the back, and the legs. And then I also did something called compressions. So I would set the timer on the stove every 2 hours. He would get brushed. And then I would take each joint from the shoulder to the elbow to the wrist to all of his finger joints and compress them straight into each other for 10 compressions. This helped Jacob regulate himself, get information into the brain. He didn't get overstimulated. It's a kind of a wave, so his brain was able to take it in. And I think that helped him transition and calmed him down. I've even been known to use the brush during some of my sessions with my kids when I'm doing the Wilson. And if they're ADHD, I'll just do a gentle brushing before we start, and the kids love it. They're not adverse to it, and I have a really good session with them afterwards. I came across Kelly Dorfman, and surprisingly enough, she also knew Stanley Greenspan, and they worked in a lot of genetic disorders. She's a phone consult. She's still in business today. And she helped me get Jacob onto a regimen for his eyes, which I'm hoping maybe that's why he's still stable with his vision. Since we've seen this one doctor, we have not seen any deterioration in the last 10 years. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a nutritionist. I just happen to have one. This is her name. This is her number. Call and get an appointment. She does phone consults. From the phone consult, we were put on, this is just an example of some of the stuff. He's on taurine, acetyl-L-carnitine, pycnogenol, zinc, cod liver oil, bilberry, and vitamin A palmitate. Call her and see what she can do for you. I don't remember how I got the piracetam, but this is called, or it's coined, a smart drug. And they've given this, I saw the 60 Minutes episode. I cannot find it anywhere on YouTube again, but it is called a smart drug because it helps with language. And as soon as I started giving this to Jacob, in a liquid form, I felt I saw a change in his speech. And I kept giving this to him for years until I felt like I hadn't seen a difference. This is not a drug that's approved in the United States. It is in Canada, it is in Europe. It's considered a vitamin. I felt like I saw something happen with Jacob. This would have to be a personal choice, but I'm just letting you know this was one of our interventions. Hand strengthening, like I said, he had weak hands, weak fingers. If you look back on the pictures, you'll see that his hand was completely flat. If you look at your own hand, you'll see that you can see the muscle development in your hands. He had none. They were completely flat. So for some of those hand strengthening, we would use I don't know what this device is called, but you would squeeze it, and you could use as many rubber bands, increase the rubber bands, decrease it. I even use guitar weights on his fingers. And I put my husband in charge of doing the crab crawling and wheelbarrowing up and down the stairs every day, just to try and help with that hand strengthening and the crab crawling, and swinging. Swinging is so important on so many other levels because it's also a vestibular stimulation in the inner ear. Plus, I never realized that when you're swinging, you're pulling and you're pushing that swing. So swinging is a great activity for hand strengthening. To this day, Jacob still has some problems with keeping his hands down. And we'll always say, hey, Jake, fix those hands. You got Mr. Smithers' hands. So he knows those. So we tell him to hold his hand in a fist because it's harder to hold your hand down like that when you're in a fist. Something I've noticed in having had the pleasure of meeting other families with Cohen's is this little bit of this perseveration on a falsetto voice. And falsetto voice is just like that Mickey Mouse voice, that high talking voice. And they kind of like choose to do this. I don't quite understand what it's all about. For Jacob, we tell him to speak in his man voice. We tell him, take in a deep breath, exhale, and talk in your normal voice. And he'll say, I'm talking in my man voice, Mom, right? So just something to think about. I don't know what kind of therapist you would talk to about that, but that was our intervention. Just taking a deep breath in, letting go, and then talking in your real voice. So the beginning of the climb, which I thought, at first I thought Jacob was just a preemie. Then I realized that he had issues. Then we did get Jacob diagnosed when I realized he had night blindness. And at the Cohen Institute, Dr. Trabulsi diagnosed him with Cohen's based on his features. He sent off the blood work to Switzerland because this is like 25 years ago. And then a couple years later, he called back. He said, yes, Jacob has Cohen syndrome. And then I realized I was dealing with not just Jacob Harper syndrome, but a real syndrome. And I did as much intervention until I got him into public school. I sent him to kindergarten and he wasn't ready. So they said he's going to go into preschool and then visit the kindergarten classroom. And then the following year, he'll do kindergarten full time. Well, that full-time kindergarten year came and they said it was a new regime. And they said, oh no, he was in kindergarten. He's going to first grade. And I said, you're putting a preschooler into first grade. And I couldn't fight the public school. And so I just thought I'll make up a really good IEP and that'll take care of that. Unfortunately, the teacher called me around November and asked me if I knew if there was an institution to place Jacob into. I thanked her for a phone call, hung up, cried, and I told my husband, I'm going to homeschool. And I did for the next 9 years. I thought it was only going to be 1 year. Thought I'll just catch him up. But he did much better with the one-on-one. And so I had learned about ECOT, which is the electronic classroom of tomorrow. It really wasn't well established then. I could do whatever I wanted. I didn't get much input. It had evolved near the end, being a really, really great resource it was a great, wonderful, phenomenal thing. I think now they have K through 12, which is very similar to what ECOT had. because I was able to do it on my own, I was able to do a multisensory, and I will talk a lot about that. What I did do was make the IEP the kindergarten report card. It just made sense to me. I think everybody's seen that poster that said everything I ever needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten. And I think that's so true. And I just used the kindergarten IEP. And once he mastered those skills, then I would just add on another goal from the report card onto the IEP. We did homeschool in my house for a while until he just would be a little stinker and go to the other room and play if I turned my back. So I ended up renting a room at the church and we had it all decorated and all full of all the resources. And ECOT sent me an OTPT speech, reading interventionist. It was fantastic. And so it really was my joy and my privilege to be his homeschool teacher. And when we were there, he was not allowed to call me mom. He had to call me teacher because I really wanted to have that separation of right here, I am your teacher, we're learning. And when we're home, then I can be mommy. During the first year that I had pulled him out, I found something called spider therapy. And this is where there's a cage and the therapist sets up these bungee cords and it helps them isolate the muscles that need to be strengthened to get him to walk better. When I was looking at the videos last night, I could not believe how loosey goosey, low tone that child was. And there was something else I wanted to say. I can't remember about the hip spider therapy. I remember, I'll come back. Then we also learned about hippotherapy. And hippo does not mean hippo as we know from hippopotamus, but it's the Greek word hippo meaning horse. So a lot of people, and I say, oh, he's going to hippotherapy. Oh, he's riding a hippo. No, he is riding a horse. And when he first started, he was in first grade. He had such low tone. He just looked like a rag doll on top of this horse. He still rides a horse today. The strength that comes from riding a horse and the confidence and the friendships that he's actually developed being at the same farm, really phenomenal. There's something about the heat of the horse and the way the horse moves and the way he has to keep himself up. Great intervention. By age 11, he did learn how to swim, and we used to use our gym time to go to Happy Days and swim at the pool. And I taught him how to swim. And then I heard about Special Olympics, and he did Special Olympics swimming forever. We're going to get back into that. And I think he's going to do bowling this year. Vision therapy. Gosh, I don't even remember how I came across this one. Very expensive, but unbelievable because I knew Jacob wasn't crossing midline. So when he was writing, he would write JACOB. I thought, oh, well, he's ambidextrous. No, these kids don't want to cross our midline. But not only does their body not want to cross it, their eyes don't. So a lot happens during vision therapy. I think he went for 2 years. One thing I do remember was hanging a big ball on the ceiling down with letters and shapes on it. And he would have to lay down there and look up at the ball, and the ball would swing in a circle. He would be clockwise, it would be counterclockwise. Then you would say, find the A, find the square, and he would have to trace it. Then it also went from the right side all the way to the left side, and then you'd swing it that way, and then you'd swing it the other way. And then you would also use the ball to just have him catch and, see the items that were on there. There was a lot of things. They would have a lot of spinning stuff, a lot of ways that the eyes would move. But I really didn't know that Jacob's eyes also didn't cross midline. So when he was looking about, he was always straight forward. So the eyes actually helped him look from side to side, look up and down. And he started to develop facial expressions where his eyebrows would go up and he would look around. Facially, aesthetically, it really changed his appearance. Montessori beads and touch math. So for math, he had to learn the one-to-one correspondence. What we had done on this occupational therapist night, we had taken Mardi Gras beads and we made all the number ones gold, all the number twos red, all the number threes silver, and so on. And so he knew that if he saw that color and had to count those beads, those purple beads counted up to six. And yet magically they would get to 10. And he would get so frustrated and he'd have to stop and he'd have to touch it again because he knew the answer was six and he had to figure out how to get to six. And then we used it in a lot of different ways. But to get that one-to-one correspondent, the Montessori beads was a phenomenal intervention. My favorite are the communication apron. So as I was homeschooling Jacob, I kept asking him, what day is it? What day will it be tomorrow? Could never get that pattern of, well, if today's Monday, tomorrow's Tuesday. Never got that. And I kept trying different ways, standing next in front of the calendar. I mean, I tried everything I could think of. And one day I thought, I'm just going to keep drawing them, keep drawing them. So I know it was a Wednesday, and I kept asking him, hey, Jacob, what day is it today? Wednesday. And so we were out and about. What day is it? And we were at Walmart, and I said, Jacob, what day is it today? And he looked at me and he said something like, is it still Wednesday? And that's when it hit me. Wait a minute. What is a day? Because when the seasons change, it could be nighttime by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or you can wake up at 5 in the morning, it's dark, or you can wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and it's bright. So what is a day? And especially if you're napping, and especially if you don't know that you're eating a cereal food or that a lunch food you just happen to have as a dinner food, but you're just woken up from a nap and it's dark and you're eating a lunch meal, it wasn't going to make any sense. So that's when I came up with the communication apron. Jacob couldn't read, but he could see colors. So what I had done is I had created color coded aprons with the day. So Monday was our green day. It would say Monday, and then you can see there's Velcro stripes across it. What I had done, I think it's in my next picture. What I had done is on the top, I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's all I had on there to start with. And so I would say, hey, Jake, we ate breakfast on our red day, Friday. We're done with breakfast. You didn't remove it, you turned it around, and it became, so it was colored, it became black and white. And then you did the same thing for lunch, you did the same thing for dinner. Then he started to understand, oh, you know what? I haven't eaten lunch yet. It's still Friday. I haven't eaten dinner yet. It's still Friday. Then he would know Friday was our red day, and he started to develop the patterns. He knew what to expect. He knew then on his orange day, he would go to hippotherapy. Once he started to, then the icons can grow. You can say it's, we're visiting grandma, we're going to the park, whatever it is. And you can also, let me go back. You can also use it as a reward system. So you can say, hey, if you get 3 stars, you can have that reward saying, we're going to the park, we're going swimming, whatever it is. And if behavior isn't positive, you can take off the star. Oh, now you only have 2 stars. We can't go to the park yet. Or you can add a sad face. Oh, if you get 2 sad faces, we're not going to the park. It's a great reward system. You can also use it for just the same way as you use breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can also use that for time. We're in the 1 o'clock hour, have a digital clock. When it says 1:59, are we ready to turn 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock? We can take off 1 o'clock. You can turn it around 1 o'clock. You can, be creative. But I'm telling you, once Jacob started to realize what a day was, what a week was, what 4 weeks meant to, then he got months. He's a kid that's with us, not a kid commanded by us. I also will explain it just like being on a cruise or on vacation. You'll wake up and you'll go, oh, what day is it today? How many more days do we have at vacation? Oh, is it really Wednesday? Oh my gosh. These kids are always on vacation and they're not expected to really have any expectation of what's to happen. Plus, behaviorally, if that child sees that it's a pink day, that is not hippotherapy day. This is our pink day. If the child goes to school and wants to go to gym and he sees it's a pink day, well, I'm not having gym today. I can only have gym on my red day. Oh, and the other thing it did for him was it did start to he started to learn to categorize. So he always knew what breakfast foods were, lunch foods, and dinner foods. And he even said to me one day, I was feeding him dinner, and he goes, "Hey, Mom, this isn't dinner, this is lunch." So it even helped him categorize things and learn to put them in categories. It was great. I had to make these aprons. I I have one that I can give out if anybody's interested in it. I have one already made. Um, I'm always willing to make another one. They really are phenomenal. In fourth grade, I came across a teacher who had asked me if I had done Wilson with Jacob yet. Hadn't heard of Wilson. I had tried 5 other reading programs, and I was getting frustrated because he just wasn't learning to read. He could do those sight words, but he wasn't reading. And she said, "Well, let's do Wilson." And I said, "Okay." And she was through ECOT, so we would meet online. I had my equipment printed out, and it was 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. And if he was starting to get it, it might be 3 hours in a day. It's very methodical. It has a beginning point and an end point. It's not like physical therapy or occupational therapy where they can have it for life. This is a short stint of time that once they master it, you've got a reading kid. And I have to say, Jacob is a reading child. He does book club, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but we are reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe every Monday night with his friends, and he is my best reader. He reads with inflection. He knows if it's a snotty voice or a friendly voice. He's done the Wicked Witch and the White Witch, and he makes her nasty. He does a really nice job with it. And it is because of the Wilson reading system. You can go online to find a tutor. They do also, some do, will work online. I cannot, obviously, I think it's fantastic because I became a practitioner myself. Along with Wilson, on the flip side of the lesson plan, they don't call it visualization, verbalization, but they kind of stole it from Nancy Bell. And the best way I can describe this is Einstein said, if I can't visualize it, I don't understand it. And visualizing, she starts, the thing that's really nice about this book, it's a script. You start on page 1. You look for that correct response. If you don't get it, don't move on. Wait to get the correct response. And she starts off with 12 cards that they're supposed to know when you ask them a question about a sentence. There's 12 questions you can ask. You first start off with 6 questions, and the sentences are easy. It might be the cat ran. Who are we talking about, and what did the cat do? Those are the 2 things you want to know. Then you'll want to know color, movement, sound, perspective. It grows to the 12 questions you want to ask. So when I give this presentation, I will ask the class, I'll say, the cat is under the chair. What did you visualize? And I'll let people think for a while. And just like these pictures, it could be anything. And the thing that can be important to find out is maybe the child doesn't understand under, because that cat is on top of the chair. You'll find out what the child is understanding. I had one child in one of my Wilson sessions where the sentence was, the girl pants up the street, up the hill. And I said, "Okay, who's in your story?" She says, "The girl." I said, "What's the girl doing?" She goes, "I don't know what the girl's doing. She's not doing anything." And then I realized, I said, "What does this mean to pant?" And she goes, "She has pants on her legs." And I went, "Oh no, pant means to breathe heavy." And she went, "Oh, she ran. So she's running up the hill." It helps you understand what, if you don't visualize it, she didn't visualize anything because she didn't know what the verb to pant meant. So she couldn't make a picture. So just like this cat is on top of the chair, maybe the kid didn't understand that under means under. And the way a paragraph is set up is that the first sentence is always the topic sentence. So the cat is under the chair. He ran there because the dog was running after him and he had his toy. The first sentence, you get a picture. The cat is under the chair. The rest of the paragraph is set up to describe that topic sentence. The next paragraph might talk about the dog. So then your picture changes. So visualization is really important. Even adults can't do this. When I have asked this question, some people go, it's a cat under a chair. And if they parrot it, you know they didn't visualize anything. So this isn't just an exclusive thing to Cohen's children. She has done this with professors in college that had a hard time visualizing, but visualizing helps with understanding. Nancy Bell also did On Cloud Nine. And this kit, I can only find it as a classroom kit, a little expensive, and then you also have to buy the book. But again, this is another one where it's scripted for you. If the child does not answer according to the way she wants them to answer, then that child does not understand the concept. And you wait for that answer because it's really miraculous. The way she wants them to answer is the way you know that they understand it. This is how Jacob learned math. And I added a couple different little nuances to it because everything can always be adapted a little bit. But you can adapt it, but it's also color coded. It's highly recommended. Another thing I will highly recommend is orthodontist work. It helps me keep his teeth cleaner now because he doesn't, that's still something he hasn't mastered. He attempts to brush, but not well. I can't imagine if I hadn't gotten him braces, how poor oral hygiene he would have. The sight cane. Nobody told me to start training him on that. I kept being told it wasn't time yet because he has a nice field of vision. Problem is he doesn't see peripherally, which means he doesn't see his feet. When we went to a park before the cane, he was hanging onto me and his fingers were just gripping into my shoulder. It was almost painful walking around with him. We got him on the sight cane in 10th grade. The next time we went to Disney, he was off exploring on his own. The kids were used to seeing him with it. He's used to seeing himself with it. And it's wonderful because he goes nowhere without it. And his apartment keys are on it. And now we don't ever have to worry about him forgetting how to get in because he'll always be with his cane. He's never without it. So highly recommend getting training early because you also will not qualify for a sight dog until you are proficient with the sight cane, which Jacob isn't, so he'll never get us. Something new is out on the market. It's called the We Walk Smart Cane 2. I have asked every engineer I come across if they could come up with it. Someone finally did. It goes on the top of the cane and it will detect anything above the chest height, including lampposts, tree branches, truck mirrors, and street signs. I want this thing. It's $1,200. It's pricey, but I plan on getting this for him. It's going to be a game changer. Once Jacob knows an area, he doesn't get lost in it. He doesn't need his cane. But if it's a new area, I saw him in 10th grade walking into tables because the cane cleared it. But then all of a sudden he was bumping right into it because he thought he was free and clear. This is going to be a game changer. I guess it simply vibrates to let him know, hey, there's something around. So then he can look what's in the way. He'll look for tree branches. It's always awful taking Jacob for walks, especially in my neighborhood, because there are low-lying branches. Or he walks into a bush because cane cleared it. So very, very excited about the WeWalks Smart Cane. He did have foot surgery. So I said he had the DAFOs, which I loved, but then he outgrew them. He was too heavy for them. They couldn't support him enough. And he had surgery. You can see how flat his feet are. They somehow put a cadaver bone into his feet. I had both done at the same time because it was 8 weeks non-weight bearing. And I just wasn't confident that he would not know to not walk on that foot. So I said, let's go ahead and do both feet. And this is post-surgery. You can see those beautiful arches. And that's been a game changer too, not having to deal with the DAFOs, finding shoes for the DAFOs. And I'm really happy. I'm really happy we did the surgery. When I said join the Cohen's community because this was a lifesaver for Jacob. This was a sight vision saver for Jacob. I thought he had pink eye. His eye was red. He wasn't reading at book club. I didn't know what was going on. I took him to the doctors for a new script. She just said, "Well, he has macular degeneration. He's blind in that eye. Nothing I can do. Goodbye." And I had put it on Facebook, and one of the moms said, "Go see a specialist." And I took her advice for heart. I think I met her family when Jacob was 5, so I had known of her for a very long time. So I did. When we walked in, the doctor took one look at Jake's eye and said, "Oh, I know what this is." And because of the degree of Cohen's that he had small lenses and they were going to become detached. It had become detached and it had slipped in front of his eye. And he said, "It will happen to the other eye." And a week later, it did. So we had both the surgeries done. He said it was very simple, just like a cataract surgery. And he went from a -11 for his Coke bottle glasses to a -1. And he is seeing better than he ever has. His clarity went from like a 2200 to a 2080 and a 2040. So it was such a blessing. And had we not gone to the doctors, it would have destroyed his eye. So I'm very, very grateful to Diane who told me to contact another doctor because this was going to happen. And I did not know that. Jacob now lives in an apartment. A, he lives here independently, but with supports, which means he has an independent provider, which happens to be me now. But we have cameras from ADT, and he has Life Alert. So we have a lot of safety nets in places. And one of the other things we have for him is an app on his iPad, which is Be My Eyes. I've always taught Jacob, because he sees things as black and white, he has an A plan. A plan is to call me. If I'm not available, he can do his B plan, which is Be My Eyes. This is all run by volunteers. You contact somebody, anybody around the world will answer, and they will see the video that you're showing them if Jacob needs help grocery shopping or finding his shoes, which he tends to lose a lot. It will show up, they help him, and then they say goodbye. And if he calls it again, it's a different person. So he's not bothering one person, but he is bothering somebody who's volunteering their time. So he doesn't get that exasperated, "You lost your shoes again. Geez, Jake." He can call Be My Eyes. He can go to the grocery store and say, "How much does this cost?" Or "Where would I go to find this?" They will help him. Love Be My Eyes. Jacob was working at Joann Fabrics, doing a nice job sorting. Fortunately, Joann Fabrics went under, so now we're in the process of finding another job. During COVID, We Thrive Together created Zooms for the children that are isolated, and it has grown. You can go to wethrivetogether.org. You can sign up, and these kids do everything to watching a movie, listening to music, playing games. And on Monday nights at 8 o'clock, I host a book club. Not all the kids read. Some of them just listen, or some of them will say, "I don't want to read tonight. I'm just going to listen." But I can't believe I went from 4 kids in 2020 to sometimes 17 to 25 kids that will show up. Just listen to our book, which currently we're almost done with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But they do, and they meet on the weekends and they stay up late. They have the kids trained. So they're special needs kids that are running. They do get a little lesson on how to run their Zooms, and anybody can sign up for this. It doesn't matter what state you're in. But in the state of Ohio, we have something called URR, which is Unified Recreational Resources. It's a social group. They do anything from movies, plays, outings. Next week, he's going to the Asian Lantern Festival at the zoo. He's met his best friend there in the Spider-Man outfit, Seth, and he just loves going there and he loves his friends. And he's done this since he was 15. So he's known these kids for quite a while. So it's a resource. You'd have to find out what your state has, but there should be something out there. I think we're near the end here. Yes. So when we were at the doctor's for the follow-up on his eyes, I said, "Are there any genetic testing going on or, trials?" And he said, "Aren't you part of it yet?" I said, no. And he said, well, you need a script from me and I'll prescribe it for you and you'll get on the registry. So I said, well, let him know he has Cohen's. It was a simple swab of the cheek. From that, we got the test result back, which of course was positive for Cohen syndrome. But then they said, well, he's so rare, we don't have anybody else with with his genetic makeup. And I'm like, oh, got to put this out here to the Cohen's community. It needs a doctor's script, but maybe if a lot of us submitted our DNA of our kids here, maybe they can come up with a trial and do something for our kids' eyes. So that's and I think there's a 1-800 number. Nope, it's at the bottom, I think. Okay, I am open up to any questions if anybody is or has a question.
Hey, Susie,
Yes.
this is Judy. I don't have a question, but I do have some information for you. You had commented regarding you weren't sure what specialties really did the falsetto and some of that voice stuff. My daughter actually learned that in grad school for speech language therapy, so a speech language therapist should be able to assist.
Of course. Of course. All right. Very good information. Yes, that would make complete sense. Thank you, Judy.
You're welcome.
Hello, this is
Hello.
the this is David Brown.
Hi, David.
So I had a question about the transition. There was the period for homeschool up till ninth grade, and then there must have been a transition at ninth grade into the next phase. Would you be able to share any thoughts or observations on that transition?
Yes, because I really wish I hadn't. When he was in econ, they didn't have any job training. And I felt like, well, I need to get some job training. So I went back to the public school, which was a mistake. Um, he didn't need the job training that they were offering because once you get out of school, you transition out of that. Then, like, I was Jacob's job codes at Joanne Fabrics. So you would still get job training eventually, anyways. But I did send him back to public school for 10th grade, for 11th and 12th for 2 years. Um, it wasn't necessary. I thought he would get experience job training, and that was why I had done that. What I really didn't know either, David, and I probably should have put this in here too, was there is something called the John Peterson Scholarship. And if you have an IEP, you can look up in your state who takes the John Peterson Scholarship, check out that school, and the John Peterson Scholarship will pay for that school. So when I finally learned how to use the John Peterson, I found something called Vision Quest because the kids can go to school in Ohio till they're 22. And when he graduated at 18, I did not want him staying in the public school. He wasn't going anywhere, and they weren't focusing on some of those rudimentary skills. So I said, I checked out this school that was near us. It was a $30,000 school, and the scholarship paid for it, and it was phenomenal. They did the job teaching. They still went back. They helped him shave and put the deodorant on and brushed his teeth every morning. They still, so you can find a school that does what you're looking for. They start off every morning doing yoga. I'm thinking, great, get them. These, you don't get physical exercise in high school. He still needed the stretching. So you can interview that school and find a better school or one that you feel will fit. I wish I hadn't gone back to the public school. I don't think it was necessary. Once he started the cane, some of the kids were cruel about it, and my daughter witnessed the kid kicking it out of his hand. It just wasn't necessary. I think when you hit a point where you're getting too much adaptation, it doesn't help him to go to that school because there's a lot out there. There's a lot of other options out there besides public school.
Understood. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, Michelle.
Yes.
All right, so what I'd like to do is I am going to want to forward the presentation to some other people. So I think we can end here. Yes.
Yes, I will stop the recording and I'll say thank you to everyone who joined. I think you did a fantastic job, and I know the information will be really helpful for many families in the future. Thanks so much for joining,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful day.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thanks,
you.
guys.